Leaf by Niggle, a story written by Tolkien, features Niggle, who had a long journey to make, which he did not like because in his view, it interfered with his painting. It would start out with him finding a place in this world for his paintings and his love for it. We would get a very vivid description of Niggle's life, such as his impulses. He would have a kind heart, which he had wished he did not have sometimes due to it landing him jobs outside of his painting. For one thing, he was sometimes just idle and did nothing at all. For another, he was kind-hearted in a way. You know the sort of kind heart, it made him uncomfortable more often than it made him do anything, and even when he did anything, it did not prevent him from grumbling, losing his temper and swearing mostly to himself. All the same, it did land him in a good many odd jobs for his neighbor, Mr. Parrish, a man with a lame leg. While he would help other people from further off, but since Parrish was his closest and possibly only next-door neighbor, Niggle would find himself helping him the most. While Niggle liked painting, Parrish was more concerned with gardening. Meanwhile, Niggle would be interested in drawing a very particular picture. It would begin with a leaf, hence the title. It had begun with a leaf caught in the wind and became a tree, and the tree grew, sending out innumerable branches and thrusting out the most fantastic roots. Strange birds came and settled on the twigs and had to be attended to. Then all around the tree and behind it, through the gaps in the leaves and boughs, a country began to open out, and there were glimpses of a forest marching over the land and of mountains tipped with snow. Niggle wouldn't have interest in other pictures, or they would merely be extensions of the aforementioned pictures. His canvas would get bigger and bigger until one day he would require a ladder to draw it. Whatever task he was faced with, he would think about the picture. Parrish would come by asking Niggle to help his wife, insisting that she has a fever. Niggle would start to feel ill, but he would press on with his painting. He would be approached by the inspector of houses, indicating a problem with his neighbor's house. "Oh dear," said poor Niggle, beginning to weep. "And it's not even finished." "Not finished," said the driver. "Well, it's finished with as far as you're concerned, at any rate. Come along." Niggle would be dragged onto a train and would be largely unaware of what was happening. He would find himself in a large, dim railway station and a porter calling his name. He felt very ill, so he would faint on the platform and they would put him into an ambulance to take him to the workhouse infirmary, which he would end up not liking at all. However, he would find himself lying in the dark where he would hear voices of his own case. This is commonly referred to as an allusion to the afterlife. They turned out to be the Niggle case, which were mainly concerning his use of his time and his painting. There seemed to be two conclusions. The first voice would warn Niggle as being too focused on his painting and grudges that he didn't give enough thought of his journey, while the second voice would argue that despite this, Leaf by Niggle would have a charm of his own, taking a great deal to explain that his journey was a sacrifice in and of itself, when he would rather paint, and on top of this he would never expect anything in return from Parrish, who failed to help or show Niggle any gratitude. And understandably so. Niggle would stop to think of the second voice, though he would start to feel ashamed later for being a case for gentle treatment. He would describe it as being publicly praised when you and all the audience knew that the praise was not deserved. The first voice would speak to Niggle closely. Niggle would ask the first voice about Parrish and assured the voices that Parrish was a good neighbor and gave him excellent potatoes, saving him a lot of time. Then they and the doctor would give him salve, good advice, and toner in his breakfast, which was a biscuit and wine, before allowing Niggle to go to the next stage of his journey the next day. On the train, Niggle would find a gift of his art. He was having trouble working on his scheme when he realizes that he needed his neighbor. "What I need is Parrish. There are lots of things about earth, plants, and trees that he knows and I don't. This place cannot be left just as my private park. I need help and advice. I ought to have got it sooner." Parrish would find out that he and Niggle switched interests, with Niggle concerning himself and gardening and Parrish with painting. They would discuss the voices that presented their cases to him. And at the end, Parrish would lament not paying as much attention as he could on Niggle's painting. Niggle would say he didn't give Parrish much chance to do so. Thus, Niggle would start to get the attention he desired for his paintings. However, Counselor Tompkins would think he was a silly little man with no use to society at all, deeming it necessary for Niggle to start his journey before it was time. However, Atkins tried to show compassion for Niggle and his situation. Perkins was surprised as he didn't know Niggle had painted. Finally, the voices decided to send Niggle and Parrish on holiday and give a region a name, Niggle's Parish. They sent a message to both of them. They both laughed. Laughed. The mountains rang with it.